When you think of American cinema, specifically films that are considered all-time classics, and films that can go under sprawling epics with grand scenery, with sweeping romance, with gorgeous cinematography, and just this immense scale that takes you into another world. What's the movie that most people come up with? Probably thought of it. This thing. Why am I bringing this up? Because I finally watched it. And I have very mixed feelings about it. Before I go into my analysis, I want to dispel this right away if anyone thinks that this is going to be a video in favor of banning this movie from cinema or banning this movie from streaming. It is not going to be that type of video. I love movies. I consider myself a movie buff. Part of the duty and job of the movie buff is to somewhat be an amateur historian if you're willing to really study film. You take the good with the bad. You analyze, you pinpoint what was problematic in this work of art. You take that in, and you let whatever the hell your emotions are flow. I believe Gone with the Wind should be on streaming. I believe Woody Allen's filmography should be on streaming. I believe that any problematic filmmaker's work should be available for viewing. Why? Because artists' work are meant to make us feel something. And it's not to say you separate the art from the artist. It's to say that you acknowledge the problematic views of this artist. And you let whatever the emotions are of their work flow. Whether that be rage, knowing that you're watching such a terrible person's work, or you're just taken away by the story. And you just let whatever the hell the movie wants to tell you. Whether you agree with it or not, you let the movie provide you with an escape. A different world. That's what movies are supposed to do. Now, to praise this movie from an objective standpoint would be this. Gone with the Wind is technically brilliant. The acting is fantastic. The score is epic. The cinematography is stunning. Every frame of this movie is iconic for a reason. There's a reason the character of Rhett line to Scarlett O'Hara is, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn." And that tomorrow is just around the corner. I just watched this, but I guarantee you I'm butchering some lines. Because I'm processing this movie. Because this was an experience. This is one of the movies that I was afraid to watch. I was afraid to watch because I knew that this was going to be how my reaction would be. That of extremely mixed. Why? Because I am also a man who believes in the freedom of all people. I consider myself a socialist, a libertarian socialist, abolishing any form of hierarchy that oppresses the freedom of the individual. And those hierarchies include typical capitalist structures. I won't be going into those here. I just wanted to provide some context into what I'm going in. It's not just that Gone with the Wind is both one of the greatest movies of all time and deserves to be revered for its technical accomplishments, revered for its acting, It deserves its 10 Academy Awards. It deserved it. That doesn't mean that the movie is not also extremely racist, paints a sect of American history with such rose-tinted glasses that it makes me want to vomit in disgust, in anger. The pieces of dialogue in there I just found repulsing. How they spoke of slavery, how they spoke of fighting the Union Army, and all this and that, and how, they're destroying our southern beautiful way of life. There was once, it's in the first few minutes of the movie, for God's sakes. The movie starts out with this. This is how the movie starts. Okay? And yet, I found myself crying during parts of this movie. I cared for Scarlett O'Hara. I cared for Rhett Brown. I cared for these characters. And I also hated these characters. I hated the Confederate soldiers in this movie. And yet, I felt for them. I cannot tell you the feelings that were going in my head. The fact that I was able to feel empathy and compassion for characters fighting for a cause that was pure evil. You cannot tell me the cause of the Confederacy was not evil. The cause of the Confederacy was to fight to uphold the status of the rich plantation owners, was to subjugate black people in this country, to subjugate them to torture and unspeakable horrors that slavery presented. I'm supposed to feel sympathy, empathy, horror when I see Atlanta get massacred. I'm supposed to feel compassion when I see that line of Confederate soldiers just in agony. I'm supposed to feel compassion and horror when this one Confederate soldier has to get his leg cut off. Perhaps it's inhumane not to feel compassion for characters who I should, because it is human suffering. Just on that level alone, they should be worthy of my empathy. They should be worthy of my compassion. I should be able to separate the vile ideology for the individual Confederate soldier in this film suffering in agony. I should be able to feel for the lines of Confederate soldiers begging for help as they're just sitting there dying in agony and in such excruciating, brutal pain. Perhaps I should. And perhaps, maybe even, I can, on a human level, while also being able to simultaneously condemn the cause that they were fighting for. There are movies that are empathy tests. Two examples that I will cite here are Joker and Clockwork Orange. Now, I know Joker has its meme status because of the you get what you fucking deserve scene, but really think about that movie for a minute. The movie Joker is about showing a person who is mentally disturbed, who is pushed to their limits, and who finally snaps. It is a movie that is supposed to show us society creates its own demons, and that if we do not help the downtrodden, regardless of where they came from, then we create our own monsters, and perhaps we are deserving of their wrath. Because, as the saying goes, the village that does not take care of the child, that child will burn down the village. That's Joker. Clockwork Orange. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. That movie is the textbook empathy test. When I think of it, you see Alex DeLarge, this evil, cruel, sadistic, vile person. Rape, brutalize, torture. People. When he's betrayed by his droogs, that's when the test starts. You are given such a deep understanding of Alex DeLarge because he's the protagonist. You're meant to examine the society he comes from. And ultimately, he is a product of his society. He is a product of his environment. Perhaps there was evil already there. We don't know, because we only see him as a teenager. We don't know Alex DeLarge, the child, the toddler, the baby. We don't know that Alex DeLarge. We know Alex DeLarge, the 15-year-old. Now, going back to Gone with the Wind, major differences between films like Joker and Clockwork Orange versus Gone with the Wind is that those two movies condemn and show you that what the actions that our main characters are taking are immoral and are wrong. Okay? You are meant to acknowledge that what they're doing is disgusting. Gone with the Wind, however, does not frame the actions of the Confederacy as objectionable. Gone with the Wind frames the actions of the Confederacy as a great cause of honor, of nobility, of defending a way of life that the damn Yankees will never understand. We're meant to sympathize and cheer on the cause of the Confederate Army, the cause of subjugating a people that never wanted to come here to begin with, that were dragged here against their will. We're meant to cheer that on. We're meant to believe that these are our heroes. We're not really given another side, really, because the antagonists, which are pretty much every Union soldier, is painted as a dishonorable, despicable villain. They're a straw man. They're not given any semblance of nuance or shown to have any type of empathy or compassion or humanity. How they're portrayed, they are portrayed as invaders, as conquerors. Perhaps the film doesn't care to explore the nuances of the Civil War, really. The story it wants to tell is that of the Confederacy. And to also remember that this movie was not written in modern day. If Gone with the Wind was made today, first of all, it would probably be a trilogy. Flat out. Gone with the Wind would be a trilogy of films. And it would explore vastly different perspectives. You would have the different sects of slaves. You would have Scarlett O'Hara and her family's struggle. You would have Red's perspective in the Civil War as he grows to mock the Confederacy and the cause of it, to ultimately believing in the righteousness of the cause. But the movie is not focused on that. The movie is focused on Scarlett O'Hara and her journey. We're meant to feel for her when everything she knows is gone. But everything that she had was based upon the subjugation and torture of other people. But there are sprinklings of nuance in this film that I found well done and that I could appreciate. When the Southerners are talking about going to war in the beginning of the movie, you have Red's character flat out say, "You guys are idiots. There's no way you can defeat the Union Army. There's no way you can win. There's no way secession is a worthy cause." There's also a line where Ashley, Scarlett's crush, or so we think throughout the movie, is looking at these incarcerated men that Scarlett wants to use as labor to start a business to get herself out of poverty. Ashley starts talking about the honor and the dignity, and Scarlett brings up the counterpoint. How is this any different than slavery? Now, of course, the obvious retort Ashley gives is the rose-tinted Southern revisionist answer of, well, it was different how we treated them, when history doesn't show that one bit. I feel very split on this movie. I'm not ranting about it because while I am angered by the message of the film and the side it wants me to empathize with and take, anger is not an appropriate response to this. The appropriate response I am finding is the response I'm giving right now. That of deep thought and trying to understand. Because I think if I was my age in the 30s and I was living through the Depression and I didn't know any black people, okay? And I saw this movie, I'd probably love it because it would take me out of my shitty existence for 4 hours. But I'm not in that world. I am in 21st century America. I am in the beginnings of the 20th year of this century. I don't know how I really feel about this movie. I want to love it because it is such a classic epic. It is a masterpiece of movie making. Technically speaking, it is stunning, as I said before. But the meat of it, the story, the politics, I find extremely difficult to empathize with. Not empathy on a general level, but empathy on a level that I can't do. Because to empathize any further would, I think, betray my principles and betray my stances of social, economic, and racial justice. This was a good release. I thank you for watching my video. I thank you for your time. Do I recommend you see Gone with the Wind? If you're a lover of film, of course. Of course I recommend you see it. And if you feel differently to how I do, I welcome it, because perhaps the most important movies are to create a discussion and a dialect for us to debate about them for decades to come. And maybe that's what Gone with the Wind is. Maybe that's where Gone with the Wind deserves to be. Anyway, leave your comments, give me your thoughts. I look forward to reading them.